Welcome into a brand new episode of the PFN Daily Live NFL News and Analysis Show here on youtube.com/Pro Football Network. I am your host, as always, Cody Rourke, video host and analyst here at Pro Football Network. Outside of that, I hope all of you tuning in had an amazing weekend. Special shout out to my man, Outlaw2448. He says, do you really... He's singing that. That's the Peacemaker lyrics. My man, all I can think of is when I see that, I think about the dancing and the choreography that goes on there. Anyways, enough talking about me. Let me bring on my co-host of today's episode of the show. He is a shareholder of Pristine Auction. He contributes a lot of his monthly salary to that to keep them operating, not to mention he's a Green Bay Packers shareholder. He's your mother's favorite fantasy football analyst. He is my co-host, Tommy Garrett. I literally saw what Outlaw had posted, and I just see John Cena and the whole cast of Peacemaker doing the dancing and like greatest intro of all time.
I'll be glad. I'm glad that you got that reverend because like I haven't seen Peacemaker, so I was completely oblivious. I was like, what song is this coming? I was really just hoping. I was like, okay, I know I'm not getting rickrolled, but what else is going on? I was completely lost.
Man, no, it's nuts. Says, what time do you call this? Hey, my man Outlaw, always with the love. Not a profile picture of me here today. I know that he had that on Friday's episode of the show, man. But Outlaw, hope you had a great weekend. Look, we got a lot to look forward to. I know for everybody, look, football, this is a slow time of the year right now, but guess what? We don't have to wait for football. We're going to have football every weekend all the way through June, beginning this weekend. The Birmingham Stallions kick things off against the New Jersey Generals on Saturday. I know we're going to talk a little bit about the USFL, some things we're looking forward to this week and a little bit later on the show. But look, I just want to say, hey, football's back this weekend, Tommy. I am stoked about it.
Yeah, I'm so happy. Like I've had a good weekend. I got to watch the Masters. Like I got to watch Tiger play like all 4 rounds. The Mets, like they almost swept the series. They won 3-1. Like I'm having a good weekend. Like F1 was back. It was a bad race, but who cares? Like, and we got football coming back. Like I'm just in a good mood right now when it comes to sports.
Well, you know what? Another reason why I am in a good mood is because we get to talk to this handsome gentleman here, the longest Twitter handle in Pro Football Network's company history in its existence, and probably will hold that record forever long. NFL draft analyst Ian Cummings. Ian, what's up, my friend? How are you? Oh, his audio's not working. He's muted. Hold on. Let's see here. Can he unmute?
There we go. We good?
Okay. You know what? I thought we were about to have a situation. I'm like, oh, he's going to have to restart his computer, and then we're going to be back to where we used to. Ian, it's great
in
to see
fairness,
you,
though,
man.
look, Ian, if you show up with good audio like 3 days and 2 weeks, that's a 300 batting average. Like that's still all-star level in baseball. So it's all about perspective.
Exactly. I was just trying to keep you guys on your toes. Okay, I was just trying to do that.
You just got to show up one more time at the right time and everything working right. You're at 400 for the week. Like,
there we go.
Good to go.
That's all-star territory, right? Exactly.
You're Ted Williams.
I will say this about our studio. So on the back end, if you're not on screen, automatically mute you. So you ain't never got to worry about that. It's if you're pulled up into the studio, then it can hear you. So that's obviously something we have rectified. But Ian Cummings is joining us here now as we're going to go through some mock drafts. We're just a couple of weeks away from the NFL draft being in beautiful Las Vegas, where Pro Football Network will not be. We'll be in New Jersey for a live draft show. Tony Pauline, Brett Yaris, and myself. A really, really cool thing coming your way. We can't announce it just yet, but it is going to be interactive. It is going to be fun for the NFL draft here on youtube.com/Pro Football Network. But with that said, Ian, let's get into some of our mock drafts. You know, we're a big-time mock draft conglomerate here at Pro Football Network, especially here on PFN Daily. This is the last week we'll be going through mock drafts officially with you. But let's start things off now, taking a look at the Houston Texans mock draft that was just released in the latest 7-round mock draft at ProFootballNetwork.com. Round 1. Pick number 3, you have them taking Evan Neal, offensive tackle out of Alabama. And look, I can't fault this move here because guess what? You have Davis Mills, and as we've heard in press conferences with Lovie Smith, Pep Hamilton, he's going to have to take a lot of steps this season, but they have belief and they have hope in him. What better way than providing another tackle opposite of Laramie Tunsil to help keep him upright? I like this pick.
Yeah, me too. And I think, with the Houston Texans, there's very few ways you can go here. That would be a wrong pick, but I look at the offensive line, needing to protect Davis Mills and obviously needing to invest in his development because they've said he's the quarterback. End of story, right? So if you're gonna make him the quarterback, you need to do everything you can to try and make him successful. Pep Hamilton has worked with Andrew Luck and Justin Herbert in the past. He's done this work with QBs before. Now get the talent around him and see how far you can go with him. So I love the idea of supporting him. I think, there is different areas that could go because you got Laramie Tunsil on the left side. Titus Howard can play right tackle, but he could also move inside. I think right here, there's no one on the roster that precludes you from picking Evan Neal because he does have that natural right tackle experience. And you look at how athletic he is, but not just that, but how smooth he is in pass protection too. He's very smooth, very controlled with his movements. For a big guy, as big as he is, it's pretty impressive, right? And then he can dish out that power when he wants to. Very good at getting out in space as a run blocker. So I love the talent, and I think the talent and the need coalesce very well here. And for the Texans, it's never a bad idea to protect your QB.
You've officially used the word preclude more times than I have in my entire life, just in one sentence.
I love that word, man. It's in my top 5
vernacular.
words.
I need to write some of these things down, just like take notes on how to actually use the English language properly, because I struggle with that on a daily basis. The other thing, look, the Houston Texans, speaking of struggling, look, wide receiver, we knew they needed some additional help, and honestly, it seems like in this year's draft, it's which Ohio State receiver is going to go first. And you actually have the Houston Texans kind of following a similar path right now at pick 13 in the first round. You've got them with Chris Olave, the slot corner we saw kind of take over at Ohio State, set the record there at the school with 35 touchdowns throughout his career there. Even worked a little bit downfield with a 14.8 ADOT last season. This just seems like a perfect fit after having someone like a Brandon Cooks on your team. You've also got Nico Collins on the perimeter. Chris Olave just seems like the perfect fit to help kind of facilitate Davis Mills' progression as it goes into his second year of the NFL.
Yeah, I really like the fit here too, and that was especially what went into the selection. Seeing other guys on the board like Drake London, Treylon Burks, they have the size, right? But you've already got size threats in Nico Collins. You got Chris Conley, but I think Nico Collins has more, long-term developmental potential. They're hoping he takes that next step this year. But I think with that size, you can complement it with a guy like Chris Olave, who, I like Garrett Wilson a little bit better. He's more my style at wide receiver. But I do think there's a role for Chris Olave and definitely a preference to be had if you do like that kind of player where he's much more efficient as a route runner. He's very surgical at sneaking into those open zones with his speed and acceleration, using that throttle control to sneak into blind spots and get into open field. The field awareness is top level for him. I mean, and that's where it starts. And then he has the speed and the burst to take advantage of it too. And when the ball comes his way, very good at adjusting and tracking it and making those hands catches. Again, when he's contacted, not as consistent, but I do like how, the bottom line with him is he knows how to get into open space, and in open space, he can adjust for catches very well. So I think that's where it starts with Chris Olave. If you have Davis Mills there, if he can identify those open reads with Chris Olave, and on top of that, he has the speed to carry extra attention and free up other guys too. So I think it's a really good fit in how he impacts the offense and what he can provide for them.
2 offensive picks in the beginning of this mock draft here for the Houston Texans. But in round 2, pick number 37, Boye Mafe, edge rusher out of Minnesota, is the selection for them here. And obviously with Lovie Smith as a defensive-minded head coach, I like this addition here. I'm a big fan of Boye Mafe, but what, in your opinion, Ian, best suits Mafe within Lovie Smith's defensive scheme fit here in Houston?
Yeah, and I think with Mafe, it's fun because he's a little scheme versatile. And I think it starts with the athleticism that he has, around 6'4", 261, ran a 4.53 at the NFL Combine, had a 38-inch vert, and I think a 125-inch broad. So the explosiveness checks out on tape. He's very bursty off the line, really gets immediate momentum with that first step. And at the same time, too, he's got great bend capacity. I think, at the Senior Bowl was where it really showed up in practices and especially in the game. I mean, he was unblockable in the game. Using that speed and burst to get around the edge, but then also using that, the strength that within his strong frame to get that handwork on the edge and, kind of capitalize on displacement with those quick swipes. That's how you want to win at the NFL level, not just the athleticism, but having the hands, the timed hands and the strong hands to win at the apex and really take advantage of that. I think he has that. He's working toward that. I think if you want to figure out how to use him, I think he can go a number of different alignments. He can play from a stand-up stance around the edge. He has the athleticism to do that. Put one hand in the dirt, 3-point stance, let him rush from there. His hands are a little lower, better leverage. I think you can do a lot of different things with him, and that's what makes him so appealing for Lovie Smith is that you're installing a new, you're getting in there. It's kind of your first year as a head coach, so I think he gives you some flexibility on the edge and the talent to develop into a star.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And also, can we move here into the third round now of the Houston Texans 7-round mock draft? You've got them addressing one of their other needs. We saw Justin Reed take off toward the Kansas City Chiefs as they try to fill in that replacement for Tyrann Mathieu. So you have the Houston Texans right here going with Kirby Joseph, the safety out of Illinois. Is he someone you project more toward be like a center field style safety where he's kind of playing and reading the defense? Or is he someone you think can work up front and kind of help out a little bit more also in the box? Or can he really just kind of do everything on the field like what the Houston Texans probably need in this defense right now?
Yeah, I think it's going to take some projection for him to get to that point, but he does have the upside to do that. I think early on, you're probably looking at a more center fielder type. I think he does have the explosiveness and the size to do that. He's over 200 pounds, has 33-inch arms, so very good length and density for safety. But at the same time, in space, he's pretty fluid. He's very explosive closing on the ball, and he led the Big Ten, or tied the lead for the Big Ten in interceptions this past season. So definitely a playmaker when it comes to coverage. When he's coming into the box, there are flashes of physicality. That said, I would like him to kind of improve his angles a little bit. Sometimes he hesitates and freezes up. You can't do that as a safety because then they're getting around you. So, there's little things to iron out for him before he can be that, that all-around safety. But I do love the playmaking upside. Right away, you can put him on that back end, and he's a threat to generate turnovers, which obviously that's the bread and butter for defense. You need to change that momentum during a game, and he has that skill set. And I think the physical potential to become more as well. So I'm a big fan of the upside with Kirby Joseph. I think if it gets to round 3, with how barren that secondary is, he's a good ad.
Well, let's take a look right here at the rest of this Houston Texans 7-round mock draft conducted by Pro Football Network. Round 3, pick number 80 that they got from the Saints, Tariq Woolen, cornerback out of UTSA. And then we get into the 4th round where they have a lot of capital. 2 picks here. Pick 107, Brian Asamoah, linebacker out of Oklahoma, gives him more range and versatility. Then adding another running back to a very loaded running back roster. Round 4, pick 108, Dameon Pierce, out of Florida. And then you get to round number 6 at pick 183, got Sezi Otomueo, defensive lineman out of Minnesota. And then 3 round 7 picks. A lot of this capital from trades and from other teams. Tay Martin, wide receiver out of Oklahoma State. And I like this one personally here for them. The addition of Cole Turner at pick 207, tight end out of Nevada. And then rounding things off here for the Houston Texans with Jason Poe, offensive lineman out of Mercer. And this has been the Houston Texans mock draft, courtesy of Pro Football Network. If you're a Texans fan, drop your comments down below to let us know what you thought of this mock draft. Did you like the selections and more? We're awaiting your comments and your feedbacks. But now, Ian, let's shift off to another team here that we're going to be focusing on in our mock draft series. The Washington Commanders. Now, in the coming days and weeks, make sure you check out our TikTok at PFN.365. I have a couple of TikToks coming out that kind of roast the Commanders in a sense. It's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to it, obviously, with the Stitch feature and the duet feature that we have there on TikTok. But getting to the Commanders mock draft right here, round 1, pick number 11. We talk about Ohio State. And in this one, you have them taking Garrett Wilson, wide receiver out of Ohio State. This is a great addition alongside Scary Terry and Diami Brown here. Tell us a little bit more on the reasoning of these picks.
Yeah, and I think, I didn't plan it to work out this way. I wasn't actually thinking of it, but we got both Olave and Garrett Wilson on the same PFN Daily here, so we can talk a little bit about how they compare. I think it's more up to a matter of preference as to who you have ranked above the other. I've seen, about 50-50, one way or the other, Wilson versus Olave. But the reason I like Wilson better is because I think stylistically, you are working with more upside there. He's a much more sudden, explosive route runner, more twitchy. That translates after the catch too, where he can make guys miss. He can get into open space. And then at the catch point as well, I think he's a little better at working against contact. With Chris Olave, it's a lot of using his speed to dissect defenses, and he's very good at that. He's very nuanced, very technical, a very smart, intelligent route runner. But with Garrett Wilson, there were times, and he can be more efficient for sure. Olave has an edge on him there, but there were times when he was experimenting a lot with his twitch and his suddenness, trying to get into DB's blind spots and then cutting back really suddenly. And he can do that. He can be an absolute menace as a route runner. Still has a way to streamline and channel that. But I think for Washington especially, you look at, trading for Carson Wentz, right? After they traded for Carson Wentz, as much as I would say, I wasn't a fan of the move, now that they've done it, you got to maximize his attack, his weaponry, right? So doing that, the best way to do that is to get a wide receiver early on and support him. And I think Garrett Wilson provides the best upside there, that 3-level threat, creating before the catch, creating at the catch point, and getting yards after catch. He can do all of that.
Nah, it makes a lot of sense too. Like, honestly, what's scary about this is that we've talked about a guy getting drafted at, pick 11 here. We talked about with the Houston Texans, back I was pick 13, I believe. They weren't even the best receiver, arguably, on Ohio State. Like, Jackson Smith and Jigba is going to be the guy that kind of resets what we saw about this entire class. And even Jameson Williams was a guy who transferred away from this team. It is just an incredible amount of talent that was on the Ohio State wide receiver core. And honestly, it's kind of nice to see Washington get away from this. We have to go defensive in the first round. Like, they spent all these years going after that. The only pick they didn't do, I think, since like 2016, 2017, was actually the Dwayne Haskins pick. Outside of that, it has always been, defensive players in the first round. So to see them kind of going towards the offensive side of things, I think it's a step in the right direction. You kind of had them continuing this, coming up here with pick 47. They're getting a little backfield help, which I think is a really interesting pick here with Kenneth Walker, the running back out of Michigan State. I know you love Kenneth Walker. I know a lot of people see Kenneth Walker as the number one running back of this class, even over top of someone like Breece Hall as the best pure runner. How do you like this fit between Kenneth Walker and Antonio Gibson, who is still kind of there as one of the better running backs in the NFL? You also have J.D. McKissick, who came back after spurning the Buffalo Bills. How do you see this whole dynamic kind of shaping out for the Commanders' backfield?
Yeah, me personally, I wouldn't make this pick. I would probably wait until, day 3 to pick a running back if I'm Washington, but
Yeah.
they have been hosting running backs on visits, and this is a team that takes those visits into account when they're making selections. They hosted Breece Hall, and they hosted Kenneth Walker on a visit too, so they're showing a little bit of interest in that sense and maybe taking one day 2. Look at Antonio Gibson, has the talent, has the versatility, but hasn't quite panned out as that all-around back that they were looking for. The vision, the instincts aren't quite there in the capacity that they are with Kenneth Walker. And I think that's where it starts, right? You mentioned, potentially being the best runner in the class. I think he is the best pure runner in the class. When you look at, what are you looking for in a runner? Obviously, explosiveness to hit lanes, the agility to make quick cuts and stack cuts in rapid succession. He's got all that. He's got very good balance. And I say balance, not just contact balance, because he has the contact balance as well, but also getting really low on your cuts and generating that potential energy and launching out of that. He's very good at leaning and stacking those cuts and keeping that balance all the way through. And that's something that really shows up a lot. And then on top of that, he's got the vision and the instincts to maximize that energy and that ability. So the game against Michigan was a clinic, and I think he ran for over 200 yards and 4 touchdowns, but that was a clinic of
Something
creating
like
space. Yeah, something like that. I'm sorry, Tommy. I don't mean to judge up bad memories.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
Or maybe I do. I don't know, but we'll see. But
Yeah.
I do think you look at the creative capacity that he has; it's all there. And so I think the receiving upside, that's a little ambiguous, right? But he did well in the gauntlet. I think it was more of a volume issue with him. So I'm interested to see what he does in the NFL. But if you're looking for a pure runner, which I think Washington, that's one thing that they lack, is a pure, early down runner who can create for himself. Kenneth Walker's that guy.
Well, in round 4, pick 113, they definitely address a position of need for them too with Cam Taylor-Britt, cornerback out of Nebraska, and a prospect that's been making, a lot of headlines himself in terms of some potential and maybe where he ends up, especially in the round 3, round 4 conversation. But this is especially important for this Washington Commanders team that legitimately gave up 34 passing touchdowns last season, kind of uncharacteristic of what we expect in a Ron Rivera defense. Now, granted, they have a lot of different guys playing anywhere. You have Fuller, you have Benjamin St-Juste, but obviously this addition now of Cam Taylor-Britt, I think, is pretty big in terms of maybe where they can go as an overall unit. Do you agree? Do you disagree?
Yeah, I agree, and I think that was kind of the overarching theme with this pick is the versatility, the flexibility that he provides you. Obviously, Taylor-Britt played a lot of boundary corner at Nebraska, but he can go into the slot. He can play safety even. I think he fits best in the slot here. I think that's where he'd go with Washington because you do have William Jackson and Kendall Fuller on the boundaries. Benjamin St-Juste, more of a rotational guy at this point, but he does have the press
You
ability.
like him too. I know that.
Yeah, I liked him, man. I mean, he was an interesting evaluation from an athletic standpoint because really big, really long, not very explosive, but super fluid. I mean, you don't expect that from bigger guys, but he's got that. He's physical too, so I hope he pans out. But I think at this moment, getting to Cam Taylor-Britt, I think it's a valuable move because I don't think it necessarily threatens the development of St-Juste because they are different players. You put Taylor-Britt in the slot, let him be that versatile player who has the length and the closing speed and the physicality to really hold up his end there. He's not the most fluid guy, so I wouldn't want him on the boundary on an island. But I do love him in the slot, kind of working from there, maybe shading back to safety. He has that versatility, and he's phenomenal in run support too. That's more of a bonus for corners, but I love seeing guys who come downhill with a ton of heat and aren't afraid to tackle, and that's Cam Taylor-Britt. And on top of that, he's a playmaker. I love the pick, and I think that he could be a really good slot defender for them.
Yeah, and sitting here looking at the rest of the end of the Washington Commanders 7-round mock draft, we have them addressing the quarterback position once again, more with a depth addition here with Caleb Elby, the quarterback out of Western Michigan here in the 6th round. Then in round 7, pick 230, Nolan Turner, the safety out of Clemson. And then in round 7, pick 240 to end off their mock draft, Andrew Ogletree, the tight end out of Youngstown State.
A lot of intriguing prospects and picks here for the Washington Commanders. If you're a Commanders fan, let us know what you think in the comment section down below. Make sure you smash that like button as well for the algorithm. Ian Cummings, my friend, hey, I appreciate all your insight. I know it's a busy time. The build up to the NFL draft is always a grind, my friend. Tell us what you got going on at the Premier NFL Draft Podcast alongside our good friend, Ollie Hodgkinson.
Yeah, so right now what we're doing in the lead up to the NFL draft is just going through the positions one by one. We've covered, I think, corner, safety, wide receiver. And just earlier today, we touched on linebacker. So we're trying to get through the positions. We still got quite a few to go ahead of the NFL draft, but more than enough time to get through it all. So that's kind of what we're doing, giving an overview of the class as a whole. from a positional standpoint. We've also got Twitter Spaces on Mondays and Thursdays at 7 p.m. So check those out. Feel free to ask us any questions if you're there.
Biggity bam, you heard it first here from Ian Cummings at Ian_Cummings_9, the longest Twitter handle in Pro Football Network. Also, a lot of great insight and analysis. You can check out he and Ollie Hodgkinson's work at ProFootballNetwork.com. In the meantime, Ian, we appreciate you for coming on, man. We'll see you tomorrow for PFN Daily.
Yes, sir. See you tomorrow. Appreciate you.
Thank you, bud.
My man, Ian Cummings. Like I said, we got Skiing Ian, our good friend Rap Sheet, who we love and adore for great journalism. He's a fantastic human being too, by the way. And then we have Ian Cummings, who's a great sleeper and obviously great at his NFL draft insight. So I love it.
If you're going to do anything, go all in. Like, don't half-ass it. If you're going to sleep, sleep good. If you're going to do drafts, draft well.
Amen. I mean, could you imagine if I wonder if I wonder in the history of NFL drafts, if anybody has ever fallen asleep in a war room. That's one thing.
If they did, they didn't have a job.
The draft rooms that they
guaranteed. There's probably no more of an electric place to be than in a war room on draft day. Like, I could not imagine if you were sitting in there, like with all these picks and the chaos happening, like that would be like one of the most electric atmospheres there are. Is be inside one of those draft rooms. I'd be all in for that.
Yeah, no, the draft rooms are very interesting too, and it's sometimes you figure out if there's moles. Like, I think a lot of organizations. When they have a draft room set up, they think about whether or not, okay, hey, what's getting put out there? Like, that's a great way to figure out if you got a leak. It's almost like those crime movies.
You
like
feed information to the right to see which information comes out. Also, like, if you look at these draft rooms, like a lot of these teams, like they're on their own social media accounts, they put like behind the scenes videos. I know the Colts have one that was like really good one. I think it was like I think it was called On the Clock was the series they did on their YouTube channel. Go check it out. It's fantastic. Love to see the behind the scenes process. But not everyone gets access to that room. Like, there's a very select group of people who they want in there. Part of that is because, honestly, there's too many chefs in the kitchen, too many hands in the cookie jar. Like, I don't need to hear all this extra stuff. But also, you got to trust who was in there with you, too.
Are you in the inner circle or on the outside of the inner circle? That's like the biggest thing. The Broncos had a good one, too. And last year, for George Payton, it was his first draft as GM. You know, one of the clips that got released cracks me up to this day. You know, I have saved in my phone. But he's on the phone with somebody. And he's like, "Yo, sorry, we're getting a call from someone who's actually going to, trade with us." Bye.
Yes,
like,
I remember seeing that video.
He's like, "I'm going to answer this call. This is from somebody who's going to give us a better deal." Bye. Like,
and everyone starts laughing when he does that.
But it's like, for the most part, between most of these GMs, it's very friendly. Like, this is all like they're in joking manner. That's not like no hostility. You know, I don't think that there's really many situations like that. I think a lot of people have fun. And then you go back to the whole draft. I know when we had to do the whole remote draft because of the pandemic, and they actually launched it virtually, which I thought was a tremendous success for the NFL.
It worked better than I thought it was going to be honest.
I actually enjoyed it a lot more than like the actual draft itself, in the sense of like what we see in the in-person product. But
I need to see Roger Goodell get booed. Nothing against him. It's just our tradition now of the NFL draft. It is what it is.
What was the one thing, though, that happened? Like Mike Vrabel. Like, I loved seeing Mike Vrabel, and I don't know what the hell his kids were doing during the NFL draft, but like one was like body painted. The other one was acting really weird, had the weird haircut, and Mike Vrabel's sitting there on the phone. I'm just like, how can he keep a straight face right now?
I think of Belichick's dog. That's what I think
Outlaw
of.
2448 says Belichick's dog. Nike was the star of that year. Spot on there. I bet Jerry Jones has slept. That's funny. That is. But then again, I don't know. I don't know if Jerry Jones would, though, because he is so particular about what goes on with the Cowboys.
Remember during the virtual draft, he was on his yacht. It was like Cliff King. We had the picture of Cliff Kingsbury at his incredible house.
It was an Airbnb. Yeah, it was an Airbnb. And he said, I had 5 cell phones here. He said it was like 90 degrees. And I don't know why I had the fire going. I was like, aesthetic. It was really cool.
Vibes.
That's what.
But then you had Jerry Jones. He was actually on his mega yacht. So like you rent this, I own this. And it was funny because then the Rams last year, they rented out this massive house, almost like as a way they were trying to compete with what Cliff Kingsbury did, getting their own place, which was interesting. Hey, it worked out. You got Tutu Atwell come out of it.
Clever branding, though, because hashtag Rams House is literally what they've kind of built on this past season. So, hey, I like it. I like ways too. And look, the Chargers, for some reason, during this time of the year, they always have great social media presence. Like, they have the best social media team in the game. Yeah. It was really cool seeing them work up close and personal during Super Bowl Radio Row. Like, they followed Justin Herbert around. They followed Austin Eckler, Keenan Allen around a little bit. But they were out there posting stuff. And people were like, hey, that's the Chargers social team. Like, even Pat McAfee was like, hey, they got the best in the game.
They do.
So that was a really cool thing to be able to see those people up close and personal. But man, the NFL draft is very interesting. Like for me, I can tell you this, like once the buildup happens, like right around probably a week and a half from now, that's probably going to be like, all right, hey, here we go. This is really probably how it's going to go. But then again, it may not go this way. Outside of that, I applaud people that cover the draft all year long because a lot of it, look, the draft is natural as it is, even on draft night, day one is a crapshoot. Nobody knows how things are really going to go. Maybe outside, maybe the first 5 picks, like it's very rare you see accuracy in the first top 10 picks because nobody can predict the trades that are happening.
I feel like this year it's pick 2. Like pick 2 to me. Like last year we knew it was going to be Lawrence and then Zach Wilson, right? We felt confident in that, and the draft started at 3
this year. Yeah,
this year it feels like pick number 2 is where I ain't got a clue. It could be Malik Willis, but it could be Aiden Hutchinson if he flips. Like it's one of the 2.
Depends on who the Jags decide to take too. But I mean, that's also a very interesting point there. Like we have no idea how it's going to go. Like it's just a guessing game. We're here to react live as it happens. So that's why I don't invest too much in like doing a mock draft this early. Like for me, like everyone released their official mock drafts the week of, which makes sense because more information. But then like, I think that Daniel Jeremiah did a great job of kind of pinpointing it out and saying, hey, right now, this is smoke and mirror season. Nobody knows what is. Like there's a lot of noise. There's also a lot of noise that gets released about prospects, and that's often leaked sometimes so it can drop the value of a player to a team that may not be in a position. Yeah, there's that one there too, which like I said, I don't believe, there's any validity to some of the things about him with football. He is a unique human being, and even his former coach, Mario Cristobal, has glaring things to say about him, and obviously was around him in the day-to-day for years at U of O. I'm a big Ducks guy too, so I got
one of the things too you
notice
is like during this time of year, like I wish we kept score in terms of like if you put an article out, were you accurate or were you wrong? Like
what was said versus what happened, like that would be cool.
Because honestly, there are teams who have their own individual person they use. They'll leak something to them, wanting them to put it out as just a smokescreen. So not even what you see coming out from some of the beat reporters tied with some of these teams. That is some stuff teams actually want going out into the media, going out into the airwaves. Like I said, it's all smokescreen season.
Great publicity
and these
too.
teams do it from the top to the bottom.
Well, did you see the one where a lot of like star NFL players read like some of their prospect profiles, like from when they were coming into the draft, like criticism, pros and cons, like doesn't, like, gosh, who was it? I think Mike Williams, somebody had said something along the lines of doesn't rise up to the catch point. It's like, okay, look at him in the NFL. He's doing this. I love seeing those things too. We need to see more of that. We need to see more of these, what people said about these prospects. And now that they're in the pros, what are they doing? And I think a compare and contrast there, that is a great thing for, I think, NFL teams to do. With great content, by the way. I think it'd be eaten up very well.
No, I think it would be too. We see it sometimes in baseball where guys will have their 80 scale, and then all of a sudden they talk about like what guys can do and what they can't do. And it's fun to look back on someone who's like, what the hell were we thinking when you do that? Because like you said, you can't project all these guys out until they get on the field. We're not going to know how good these draft picks were probably for another 3 years. It is what it is. Yeah. But it's fun to let's reevaluate the process. Honestly, we can probably all learn something from that time frame. What were we looking at here that we missed on? What were we looking at that we actually saw that correlated to what actually worked out in the NFL? You can learn a lot, honestly, more from your misses than you did from the ones you got right.
Well, you just said something that's very valuable. You said you can learn more from your misses. I try to learn more from my wife too, but sometimes she says I don't listen to her. So
no wonder I've learned nothing. I don't have one of those.
I don't know if I learn from my misses because it's hard for me. I guess I have a hard time hearing. Outlaw 2448, happy opening day again for teams. Yeah, various teams. Dude, sports rules, man. We had the UFC this weekend. We have NBA playoffs starting up this weekend. We have USFL football starting up this weekend. Baseball is back. It just kind of feels like, Tommy, all is right in the world outside of.
Well, we've also got the teams that are showing up now for workouts
OTAs,
and stuff like that too in the NFL.
Showed up today. I think the Dolphins showed up last week, if I'm not mistaken. Texans are there today, if I'm not mistaken. Teams with new head coaches, a good portion of them have begun today. So, hey, that's exciting news there, I think, because we're one step closer because it's really going to be these offseason conditioning, OTAs and everything after the NFL draft. And then what happens afterwards, you see the mini camp, the rookie mini camp a few weeks after the NFL draft happens. And then vets report, no contact. Obviously, that's a great part about it. No contact in the offseason. And then they take about a month and a half break, vacation, and then it's back for training camp where they will never be 100% for the rest of the way in a grueling 17-game regular season schedule as they all have ambitions of making it to the big game and hoisting up a Lombardi trophy. That's why we watch. But, various players I've spoken to, Broncos, like I said, getting back to the field, they're excited about it. There's a lot of optimism right now inside the Broncos building, but the thing too that I would say is like, while there's a lot of hype, with hype comes pressure.
Yep.
They're not focused on that right now. They're just focused on getting better and obviously, continuing to work out, build camaraderie and kind of change some things inside the Broncos organization, building wise. Team culture is at a really good high right now. And I think with the, introduction of Russell Wilson, I think everybody's going to follow suit. So that's going to be exciting to see. And I think that's the same vibe right now too for the Miami Dolphins. I haven't gotten a chance to check it out just yet, but I Am Athlete just dropped an episode on Monday, and it features Jalen Waddle's on there alongside Jamar Chase. And they talk about Tua. They talk about Joe Burrow. Pac-Man's on there. Omar Kelly's on there. Ocho Cinco's on there. Ocho's obviously a great friend of the show. We love Ocho. But yeah, other characters that are very interesting in a sense. But it's like you get to hear from Jalen Waddle and these guys about kind of what goes on, where their excitement level is at. I mean, right now, if you're the Cincinnati Bengals, Tommy, like you got to be excited because, hey, guess what? Joe Burrow's like, hey, I got an offensive line, guys. Like, look, here's what we could do. So I'm excited to see what the Bengals are able to do here.
I mean, the Bengals, like up until like, if you take away like what the Broncos are getting Russell Wilson, then like the Miami Dolphins, like that's probably your top 3 teams, adding the Bengals, who are like the biggest winners of the offseason. I think it's probably the Broncos, the Dolphins, and the Bengals, just because, like I said, they finally decided, hey, we want to protect Joe Burrow, and they kind of went all out to do it. You were able to bring back Jesse Bates. Like, that's a team that's just ready to dominate this year. And honestly, they're going to want to be one of the tougher divisions. Obviously, the AFC North is going to be no cakewalk, depending on what happens with Deshaun Watson, how long he's going to play this year. But still got to deal at that point with Lamar Jackson and what we're expecting to be a healthy Baltimore Ravens team. So yeah, like even them, like they made the moves they needed to do. But like I said, it's going to be one of those seasons that I think it's going to be a really interesting one. That's for sure. With no shortage of storylines.
Is Outlaw 2448 dropping a hot take here? Wait until the Bengals don't get back to the playoffs. Anything is possible. I mean, you are certainly right.
You're not wrong on that part. Anything is possible. No, it would be very Bungles to pull that off. Like they would turn back to that name rather than the Bengals they are now, to not go back to the playoffs. But to me, it's just a team that's so young and they're just ready to go right now. But at the same time, it's getting a wild card spot is going to be brutal. Like trying to win 10 games this year, that's going to suck. Like there's very few teams. If you looked at some of the win total projections, there are very few teams with a 9.5 plus. Like most people are kind of hovering around that 9 to 9.5 kind of range in terms of wins. Most of those being on the AFC. If I remember correctly, when we looked at Caesars, I think there were 9 AFC teams were projected for 9+ wins. That's brutal when you think about only 7 of those are making the playoffs. Only 1 of those are getting a number 1 seed. So you're going to have to win a lot of games. And honestly, it's going to come down to those road games. Can you beat up on the worst team in your division? And then can you steal a couple on the road, whether it's in division or out of conference even? That's where the schedule is really going to come down to it. You've got to beat up on the teams that you're supposed to do. And honestly, the problem is for the Bengals, there's no real easy team to do that because even the Steelers, like you're not going to be a cakewalk trying to beat the Steelers, knowing how that rivalry has always been.
Yeah. Abuff66 says Finn's head coach, quarterback coach, offense coordinator, all at Tua's foundation. It says a lot, and I think that they want to try it with Tua. I think that's one thing Mike McDaniel has
No question.
I always go back to the Pat McAfee show. He says, how are you going to get Tua to the next level? He's like, score more points than the opponent. Like, I love
honestly, that's a good starting point.
It's a great starting point.
Honestly, Mike McDaniel instantly became like the most likable coach in the NFL.
Oh, gosh. I mean, I think between he and Mike Vrabel, like, who are some of the most likable coaches in the NFL?
Dan Campbell.
Let's think about it. Well, yes, Dan Campbell, right? There's him. There's Mike McDaniel
Tomlin.
now. Mike Tomlin's very likable. Mike Vrabel. There's 4.
Yep.
What's up with the mics? We got a lot of mics here.
That's true. You got a lot of mics. I mean, Sean Payton. I'm not Sean Payton, but I mean, Sean McVay. Sean McVay's likable.
Yeah, he's good, Sean. Zach Taylor was kind of up there for a moment. Like at the beginning of last year, nobody would have, everyone said like, hey, he's on the hot seat. Like nobody saw what was going to happen with the Bengals happen, but it did and kind of preserved a little bit of good faith and they extended him there. Jury's out there. Likable coaches.
I mean, I'm going with Sean McDermott. I'm a Sean McDermott fan.
Sean McDermott. There's
Andy Reid, the Walrus. You've got to appreciate Andy Reid, a guy who loves barbecues just as much as
Nathaniel Hackett. Like, I would say Hackett's very likable. I mean, everything that his players have said about him from Green Bay to Denver now, they're super.
I don't have much of a feel on Hackett. I know that's what's way obviously closer in your range with the Broncos. I'm still trying to get used to him. I don't have a great feel because it's not necessarily my area.
So I'll tell you a story. Okay, so when I sat down and I had a chance, off camera, talking with Justin Simmons about Nathaniel Hackett at Radio Row, he said, dude, the first thing he did when I met him was like, give me a hug. Like they just hug, like, stuff like that. I think that's different. Like, we know the NFL is a business, and the way that we see things being done, obviously, we know the business side obviously ruins, I think, the impact and the optics of maybe how people should view the game. Because I think at the end of the day, it's got to be about that. Like when I was a coach, Tommy, I didn't come in every day all serious, like, all right, we're going to do this. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. It's like, hey, how you doing? Like, it's the human side of things, right? And I think this is the perfect opportunity to kind of transition into, I think, an important topic here. And, unfortunately this weekend, we saw a couple of examples of the dehumanization of sports. And I think particularly in this practice, in this world that we live in right now in sports media in general, we see it far too often. And, I think fans do it as well. And Tommy, you brought up a great point on the PFN Daily NFL News podcast about this a little bit more exclusively. You want to hear that, go check it out on your favorite podcasting provider. We see it with fantasy sports too. Like when a player doesn't perform well, we see people on social media say, oh, you just ruined my whole fantasy lineup for the day. It's like that right there is a prime example of the dehumanization of professional athletes in sports. And one thing at Pro Football Network that we have talked about, and I hope we can continue to be a great example of doing this and being an advocate for it, is humanizing athletes in sports, allowing athletes to tell their stories and not us trying to tell their stories for them. I think giving them the platform to do that is super important. And that's something I always strive to do as long as I have some kind of control and realm here in the video world side of things at PFN. That's always going to be a goal of mine is if we ever get athletes on, I want them to tell their stories. I want to listen. Like I want to throw some questions their way, but basically give them a chance to say. And I think Radio Row is a great example of that because we got to hear about a lot of the philanthropic, adventures that these athletes are involved with outside of just football. It's like, some of them are involved in like nonprofits to combat human trafficking, like stuff like that. Like this is stuff that's you would never know because guess what? Here in media, we don't talk about that stuff. We just talk about stat lines. We talk about a player struggling. I think we got to change that in this industry, man. And unfortunately, this weekend, there was some bad examples that were put out there with the tragic passing of Dwayne Haskins, who played for the Washington Commanders at one point, who was a Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback, who tragically lost his life in Florida this week after being struck by a vehicle, passing away at the young age of 24 years of age. And, here at Pro Football Network, we're going to send our thoughts and our prayers out to his family, his loved ones, his teammates, and everybody who knew him, everybody who was impacted and touched by Dwayne Haskins, gone way too soon. But just once again, like in situations like this, we see the examples that get posted out there about making it more than what it is. A young man lost his life tragically, and we want to focus on some of the things about, his struggles, his inability to catch on with this team or this team. None of that stuff matters. And something that sports media has to change.
I think what frustrated me the most about this was on a day where a young man lost his life, he wasn't the name that was even trending on Twitter. Sadly. It was the people that were changing the narrative and trying to make it about themselves. I'm not going to go into it too much. I think we all know
everybody knows
what we're talking about. Yeah. But to me, the biggest thing was like, we're not celebrating the life or mourning the loss. Instead, we're talking about the ancillary things that have gone on the outside. What did Dwayne Haskins do wearing a particular jersey? What did he do wearing a certain number? And when he put that face mask on, they just became the gray, nameless, faceless person that a lot of people see when they just watch their TV. You lose the personality. You lose the humanality of these players that are out there, of these other humans that are out there putting their bodies on the line, playing a sport. It's honestly, it's a sport. Like this is entertainment at the greatest sense that it is. It's the best reality show, and it gets people so involved. It is our escape. Like I know for me and you, like the sports is where I go to get away. I know a lot of people that are watching this, they do the same thing. And as a nation, sports have always kind of been like what has kept us all together. Go back to 9/11. Like the first thing that came back was baseball, and that helped to bring the nation together. Like, and sports have kind of always been that way. And there was always the respect of the players, but at a certain point, whether it's with social media making it so easy to be able to get a hold of a player, and then you lose that sense of everyone has this increased sense of entitlement that you can say whatever you want to someone. You can say whatever you want to about someone's character and go directly and find them directly and tag them and mention, like I've said it before, like the term fan, it's just short for fanatical. Like, and there's times where like that is just nothing but fanatical nonsense that is being spewed toward these players. Like there's a reason so many players have distrust towards the media. Because you see, like they hardly ever are talking about the good things that are happening. Like we hear about what these players are doing off the field when it's time to announce the nominees for the Walter Payton Man of the Year award. Like We're not talking about what they're doing throughout the rest of the season. Like, they talk about the bad things that happen off the field, these off-field incidents that, okay, it's, hey, protect the shield, blah, 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 do this. But why are we not propping up the guys that are doing good things in their community? Like, let the players be the narratives instead of letting us just dictate what the narrative should be for them. And you saw that at Radio Row, and like, that's why I was actually, the one good thing that came out of the pandemic was a lot of these athletes and across all sports are kind of taking the voice into their own hands. They were starting podcasts, they were starting YouTube channels or Twitch channels, and they were able to put themselves out there, create their own brand to where at that point I can combat whatever narrative you want to throw out there. Like, say what you want to about Aaron Rodgers and his personal beliefs. He was coming out there and at least trying to maintain the narrative of himself. I got to give him respect for that out there, at least. You got to do that one. But there's so often, like, you just see people just attacking athletes, or just, whether it's for a byline to get a click or whether you're trying to get some clout on the internet, I'm so sick of it. It is the one thing I hate the most about this industry that we're in, because we are in the media. This is a media business. But at a certain point, like, we've all got to do better in terms of trying to give the players the platform. Use your voice, try to help some of these players, and in turn, you can help out some of their causes, because you can help out where these guys have came. Look at Najee Harris and what he did, for the homeless shelters in his area. We all know his stories. Like, we know what these guys are doing behind the scenes. Give that the spotlight. Like, drown out the bad that is happening with more good. Like, we're trying to make this world a better place. So let's use these athletes who have the means to do so, help them give some more light to their causes. Like, it can't just be on them. And I think the media has got to take a turn and have some accountability for trying to help make this a better world that we're trying to be a part of, and a better media outlet to begin with.
Spot on. You said a lot of great points there that I think really drive home the importance of what we're trying to do. And I think that, unfortunately, as you mentioned, social media, anybody has a platform now. Like, anybody can create a platform for themselves and use it either for good or for bad. And we see it often at times, especially with these troll accounts that have like the fanboy fake avatars and, the stand names, that they have there on their Twitter handles there. There's a lot of toxicity on the interwebs here, but there's also another great point here that Outlaw 24.
I was going to ask you to bring that one up. Yeah.
This is another reason to add into the argument for why locker rooms shouldn't be open immediately after the game. It's spot on. You know how we feel about this, Outlaw?
Yeah.
Like, we are fully against, like, the locker room is sacred. The locker room belongs to the players.
It's for the players.
Media does not belong in the locker room, in my opinion. And that's just me speaking on behalf of myself, because as someone who's been in a locker room and somebody who interacts with players, it's like, hey, players just got done battling it, going to war, on the football field, sacrificing their body, to be able to help their team win, but also to secure their future for them and their family. And then,
Bingo.
It's like, there's always a rule. We always call it the 24-hour rule. Like, you know what? Media availability happens 24 hours after a game as well. You have the immediate post-game stuff. You have the press conferences where they come to a podium and ask, answer questions from the media. I think that should be the common practice there. But I don't think you necessarily need people inside the media asking them, how they're feeling after a game. It's like, you do see the raw emotions. You see sometimes the frustration. You see the anger sometimes. It's good when you're winning. It's exciting when you're winning, but it's like in the moments where you don't, because winning, is only a byproduct of the whole entire experience. You do run into that. So I have that strong feeling too. And I think that this is, what we've seen with the dehumanization of athletes in sports media. I absolutely believe this is another argument that says, hey, like, locker rooms, there's a reason why players were not happy. Like, when the announcement happened, hey, you know what, locker room access is back open for media. It's like, oh, so now we got to tone it down a little bit. It's like, that's,
you heard the player,
that is their
but
home.
You heard the media members at the NFL owners meeting cheering, because they knew what that meant. They knew they can get back in there. They can get their storylines out there quickly and get ahead of the narratives and all that kind of stuff. Like, we knew, what's going on. Like, there was a reason, like I said, all the players were like, oh, great, here we go again. Like, and it's like you're saying, it's just, we don't need the instant reaction, because that guy that just got burned, that is being called trash, and he's a bad player online. Like, that guy also knows that, look, he is in the NFL trying to generate generational wealth for him and his family, knowing where he might have came out of. Because look, so a lot of these guys have came from some rough areas in this country. Absolutely. And like, look, sports have been their
Football's
way.
the only way for some people, for some prospects,
where they've been, and also they can use that money to then change the communities they're from, to build back up their hometowns, to take care of the people that are close to them. Those bad plays they're making, that is putting their livelihood and their capabilities to have an impact at jeopardy. So just because I want a storyline about, okay, well, what happened here? Why'd you have such a bad performance today? Have some empathy to know, hey, look, there's some other things that are being impacted by this, and that's just kind of one thing that gets me. Like, let it breathe. Let the locker rooms be for the players. Coaches, obviously, they're in there too. But even like you hear coaches say, like, look, the locker rooms are for the players. You heard a lot of times in baseball, you don't go to the manager's room. The managers don't necessarily always come to the locker room. Like, those are for the players. And it certainly is not for the media. And that's just my opinion.
Dude, even like, you make a great point too about coaches. When I coached, the locker room was for the players. We, the only time we'd go through the locker room is when everyone was done with practice, we'd go make sure everything was cleaned up. And if not, players would have to run for not cleaning up the locker room, not taking care of their areas. Outside of that, anytime we pass through the locker room, we're on our way out to practice, and we're telling people like, hey, make sure, we're doing this. You got this. Make sure you have everything. Coach, I forgot my knee pads today. Well,
head to the trainers.
Go to the equipment room and go get some, and then that's going to cost you $10. Like, those are things like coaches don't hang out in the locker room. Like, that's the thing. And so I think that there's that rule there. And I think it's so spot on. I think it's so important about that too. And even one more point, and then I'll move on from this. When media, they can ask questions. They can ask certain questions that they want to. And sometimes the way that they ask questions can come off as kind of antagonistic in a sense. And it's like, then the athlete gets punished or fined for responding in a way that, maybe is like defensive or, is not necessarily the PR way to respond, but you put them in an environment, in a situation where they can't be themselves and they get put on the spot like that. Like, it's rough.
And how often in those comments do we only see the response? We don't see the question.
You don't see like, we missed a lot of missing context. A lot of missing context is had in this media world, not just in football, but in every sport. We see it all the time too. Like, hey, here's a great example. Frank Vogel, the head coach of the Los Angeles Lakers, literally last night after the game against the Denver Nuggets, was at a press conference, and they brought up the fact like, hey, have you been told that this is your last game? And he goes, I don't know. But it was already tweeted out on Twitter that he was fired and that he no longer had a job. Like, that is exactly what I'm talking about.
Go back to Andrew Luck. Like, when the news came out against his wishes, where
During
Andrew Luck is going to
game.
retire, and during the middle of the preseason game, and he gets booed going off the field for the last time. Then they have to have an impromptu press conference while he's up there emotional about the whole situation. Like, he was going to have one. It didn't have to break right there. That's just another one of those cases where, like, hey, look, let's get this out there before everyone else. I don't care who this impacts. I just want the story. Like, and that's the exact same thing I'm talking about with Frank Vogel. Like, the news is out there because we have to push this before someone else does. And there's got to be this fine line and this balance between what's going on with these teams, these coaches, these players that are being effective, and putting out the storylines. Like, there's got to be a middle ground here somewhere.
Yeah, we'll see how things all pan out, and I hope that the business continues to evolve a little bit because I think that's important. And I do appreciate the reporters. I do appreciate the people. There are a lot of people
without question that they're busting their asses out there doing this job.
That do care about the welfare and really the human side of these athletes. And I just want to say, hey, we appreciate you. Salute to you there. The older I get, the more I appreciate what Beast Mode did. I'm just here so I don't get fined. Spot on. I mean, and that's how a lot of people feel too about it. But hey, we got some other NFL news.
And he also did that at the right time because that was before Skittles really burned me, and they changed the lime Skittles to green apple. The first time I picked up a pack of Skittles and it was green apple, I felt so betrayed because lime was one of my favorite flavors in there. And the minute you change it, you don't give me warning.
Sour is the way to go.
Trust issues. Yeah. I do. I got a pack of sour Skittles one time, and there was a bolt that was inside of it covered in the powder coating. I should have just ate it, and so I could sue them. I could be rich right now. I should just. I thought you
were about to say you have a pack of trust issues. I was like, I do too, Tommy. Like,
I do got a pack of trust issues, no doubt about it. That's a king size bag of trust issues.
$3.99 at your local grocery store. You can
no
get
kidding.
It outside of that. All right, hey, let's get to our NFL news roundup here on today's episode, PFN Daily, as we enter the final moments of today's episode of the show, the Baltimore Ravens. I know our good friend Brian Mahaffey is very excited about this because all offseason long we had heard about it. I hope the Ravens bring back Calais Campbell. I hope Calais Campbell doesn't retire.
Patrick
well, guess
Card
what?
And Calais Campbell. Those are the only two things he cared about this whole offseason.
And both are officially back here with the Baltimore Ravens. Calais Campbell, obviously for him, a veteran in the National Football League, has spent quite some time in the league himself. At one point was a very dominant player on the defense side of the ball. But, last couple of years been dealing with some injuries and hoping to close things out on a high note here with the Baltimore Ravens. Now they bring him back to the mix here. You still have Odafe Owe on the outside as an edge rusher. I'll be intrigued to see what the Ravens decide to do with more defensive line depth, not to mention also at the defensive outside backer, pass rushing position. What are they going to do there? Because as we talked about on one of the PFN dailies here, looking at all their free agents before free agency, they got a lot of old dudes. And they got a lot of guys that were banged up from injury. And you know, maybe the injury part won't change until you know, they change the practice field. I know that even Matthew Judon last year threw something out there. It was really interesting. Well, they talked about the strength and conditioning coaches. If that person was like, had a tendency to rush players back when they weren't ready. But it's like when stuff like that gets put on social media, you don't know what to believe. But like if players feel a certain way, it's like, okay,
we've heard the same thing with Washington too.
What is the consensus here with that? But Calais Campbell, obviously, you know, a guy who's coming back, you know, coming off of an injury as well. How might he fit in here with the Ravens, in your opinion?
I think the big thing with the Ravens, we talked about this when we did the free agency breakdown, they just needed to be healthy. Like, you've got enough talent on this team. You kind of look at this defensive line. You've got Michael Pierce, Justin Matsubuke, you know, Derek Wolfe, Adafe Owe. You've got Patrick Queen back there, a linebacker. So to bring in someone like Calais Campbell, he's just very much he's not out there on 100% of the snaps, but you bring him in there on pass rushing situations, makes a ton of sense. And honestly, he's just 6.5 sacks away from hitting the century mark, which I'm sure is something he wants to do. I know he'll be 38 by the time this contract expires, but it's a deal that works out for both sides. It allows Calais Campbell to kind of extend his career, and it gives the Ravens a little bit more depth at a very critical position. To me, I just like this move a lot because it's not a team that needed to make a ton of moves. You just needed to be healthy, and they'll still be competing for one of the top spots in the AFC.
This is interesting here, too. I just got an email from betonline.ag, and one of the things they're talking about, opening NFL Defensive Player of the Year chances. Guess who the favorite is right now at 13-2 odds? Myles Garrett is the 2022 regular season defensive MVP favorite.
Over top of TJ Watt?
Right now. TJ Watt is at 7-1 odds right now. So
he's a 7-1. So what was Myles Garrett?
13-2, which is interesting because it says here Myles Garrett is the favorite,
that's
followed by TJ Watt, Aaron Donald, Micah Parsons, Nick Bosa, and Joey Bosa. So really it goes Myles Garrett, TJ Watt, Aaron Donald, Micah Parsons, Nick Bosa, Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, Chase Young, Crosby, Miller, Chubb, Danielle Hunter. Interesting enough. And then it's like, let's see who the first DB is. He is right below Chase Young, who Chase Young is coming off of an ACL injury. That's very interesting. I wonder
Crosby might be the sleeper candidate, honestly, if you're looking for the better return.
He and Von Miller are tied for the same odds at 25-1 odds here, according to betonline.ag, which is nice.
I like that a lot better than the 13-2.
Derwin James, surprise move, is the first DB. He and Jalen Ramsey have the same odds at 33-1 odds for the defensive back position.
When was the last time we saw a safety win Defensive Player of the Year?
Yeah, that's a great question. I can't remember off the top of my head. It's been rough. Yeah, let's see. When was the last time that a safety won that? That'd be intriguing. Did Ed Reed ever win it?
The last time a safety won Defensive Player of the Year was in 2010, and it was Troy Polamalu.
Okay. Yeah, dude, Troy was on some different stuff. Like, even Pat McAfee's like, what the hell are you doing lining him up? You coaching on sound football, Coach Tom?
Troy Polamalu, like, as a Stewart, getting to watch him was just a joy. Like, I cannot understand. Like, even for as good as Dick LeBeau was, he knew, like, don't just let Troy Polamalu do what he does. And that was what he did. Like, when he timed the snap and jumped over the Titans offensive line, like, who does
unbelievable. That? Chef's kiss. So he did that like interception that he had against the Chargers where it's like he underneath, like barely inches, got his glove underneath the turf.
Yep.
The one-handed snag off of Phillip Rivers. That was incredible. Like, that dude was an absolute dog.
Troy was special. I
don't know if they make guys like Troy Polamalu anymore.
No, they broke the mold with him.
I think that's very hard to find a guy like that. Like, you know, Tommy, we got to grow up in a great safety era, right? Think about Bob Sanders, Troy Polamalu, John Lynch, Ed Reed.
Yep.
Oh, man.
Speaking of Bob Sanders and Ed Reed, they were both NFL MVPs. Sanders won it in 2007 with the Colts, and Ed Reed won it in 2004 with the Ravens.
Dude, Ed Reed was a dog, man. Like, you want to go back to an era of football that literally had the dog mentality. It was the Ed Reeds of the world.
That was when the AFC North really became like the black and blue division. When they had like Ray Lewis, Terrell Suggs,
prime time game every week. Sunday night football, Monday night football, you would have an AFC North divisional matchup where you'd have a team from the AFC North representing for the most part. Man, just some good battles. I wish – honestly, because I know NFL Game Pass, it doesn't go back that far. I think they go as far back as 2009, which is not as good. I would love to go back
NFL
to like
Game Pass ruined themselves.
2003s, 2004s, 2005. I would like to see, you know, games from the 2004s, you know, up there. Because 2009 is the year that Josh McDaniels took over for the Broncos. I'm like, I don't care about seeing that disaster.
I'm trying to get over that time frame. Like, I don't want to remember that.
No, hopefully they do improve that product because us football lovers deserve a better product here in the U.S. Like,
a lot of people learned how to use a VPN when they heard about the UK version of No Game Pass.
Well, yeah, I mean, I live in London right now. To be honest with you, Tommy, I do. So
Yeah, that all 22 works pretty well in London, I hear.
I get it, man. I said, good gambler. Anyways, outside of that, we got some other news to get to. Then we're going to close out with some USFL discussion and talk here. The Philadelphia Eagles, they've signed former Oregon wide receiver and standout Devin Allen to a 3-year deal. Now, for him, he's an Olympic guy. He's been an Olympic hurler for the last several years.
And
he's
a
also
very successful one.
He's a very legitimate speed threat. So it's like, okay, maybe is he the replacement here for, a Jalen Reagor? Maybe. I think so at this point in time.
Can he hold on to the ball? At that point, that's what it
takes.
I
tell you what, watching him at Oregon, he was the most reliable threat that they had. Like, unbelievable. Like, Justin Herbert loved him. Marcus Mariota loved him. Like, he was chef's kiss in terms of that. But it's like, it's different. When you haven't been playing football for quite some time, can you get back?
Hasn't played since 2016.
We are seeing, though, like a Bill Belichick style, a guy like some lacrosse dudes coming out and maybe even playing kick returner and wide receiver in the NFL. I know there's that one guy, which everyone's like, hey, Bill Belichick is probably looking at him with his binoculars right now. Like, we see guys like that every year. So, for the Eagles, hey, good for them. Interesting enough,
take a shot. Like, bet on athletes. Like, it's never a bad thing to do. At least one thing look, no one's going to go with his legs because he's probably going to hurtle over a defender. Because I think he came in like, what was it, 5th and I think 4th in the 110 during the Olympics. Ran like the 4.35 when he was at Oregon's pro. He was the fastest player on the field. Like, that shouldn't necessarily be a surprise. So yeah, put him back at kick returner at least. Like, I bet he would probably make a roster doing that. Like I said, any addition he brings to receiver is kind of just a bonus.
No, it's spot on is too. But, here's an interesting question too that I have, and we'll move on to the USFL after this. The Eagles, for example, it's like, okay, you go out and you make a move to get a wide receiver, but it's like your offense is really not predicated off passing the ball. Like, for example, the Eagles are a run-first team. Like, they run a majority of their plays as running plays, and it's obviously with Jalen Hurts. It's obviously with Miles Sanders. Like, they have a combination that works for them, and that's with running the football. They're not much of a pass-happy team. And so I don't know. It's like, what does this move mean for them, too, especially if they're not going to throw the ball as much? Look, you got Devonta Smith. You're going to have to throw the ball, but it's like, this is not their identity is to throw the ball, though.
The NFL is still a passing forward league. Regardless, you still have to pass the ball to be successful. And like, if you look at just like the season-long split for the Eagles, they were sitting right there at like 50%. But even 50% just a passing rate is actually the lowest in the NFL. I think part of that was just because the Baltimore Ravens weren't there to take their place. Because the 3 previous years, they were like 44 to like 46%. Last year, they jumped up to about 56%. But that was honestly just because they didn't have anyone in the backfield to hand the ball off to. Like, they were better off throwing the ball with Lamar Jackson than handing the ball off to someone like Devonta Freeman. You didn't have your J.K. Dobbins or your Gus Edwards back there to reliably to rely on, so you had to throw the ball more. But the Eagles, they found their success really when their scheme kind of flipped after the bye week. Like, from week 8 on, they ran the ball almost like 61% of the time they were running the ball. It's like, you had success doing that. So I don't necessarily see that changing too much going into this year. You still need those competent receivers on the outside. I think Devonta Smith still needs help. You've got a good move tied in with Dallas Goedert, but you definitely need that number 2 on this team as well. So I think they're obviously not done making any moves by far. Like, this is a speculative move you hope works out rather than drafting someone who will find success at the NFL level. Like, to me, this feels more like a kick return special teams kind of duty rather than being that number 2 to compete with someone like a Quez Watkins. I think they're still needing that. And I think the Eagles will get better in terms of the passing game, at least be more efficient. But like I said, this is still a team that's going to be based around the run more than anything else, because honestly, it's just what worked.
Yeah, no, spot on. Why go away with what works? You can continue to evolve, and that's the hope for Jalen Hurts this year. But you know what is evolving? The game of football, and the USFL kicks off this weekend, Tommy. I am stoked about it. Now let's talk about this here. Here is your weekend slate here. On Saturday on Fox, NBC, Peacock, you're going to have the Birmingham Stallions opening up the season, hosting the New Jersey Generals. I'm very excited about that. That is Saturday's game. And then you have 3 games on Sunday. The Houston Gamblers, the Michigan Panthers, the Philadelphia Stars taking on your New Orleans Breakers, Tommy. And then the Sunday evening matchup is the Tampa Bay Bandits taking on the Pittsburgh Maulers on Fox Sports 1. Now, there's some things I'm excited about. Let me open this link up right here. USFL Rules, because there's a lot of people. You're going to see a lot of experimentation here.
There's a lot of new stuff. It's going to take a couple games to get used to.
So it says here, extra points. When teams score a touchdown in the USFL, they'll have the option to attempt a 1, 2, or even a 3-point conversion. Teams will receive 1 point for a kick made with the ball snapped from the 15-yard line, 2 points for a scrimmage play from the 2-yard line that successfully crosses the goal line, and 3 points for a scrimmage play from the 10-yard line that successfully crosses the goal line. I guarantee you, I don't think we're going to see a lot of 1-point attempts. I think we're going to see a lot of 2 and 3 attempts here, which means they're like, hey, 2-score game.
It was the AAF who did something similar to this, where they had multiple ones to try, and the 1.1 was rarely ever attempted.
And they even said, too, they put it out there. They said that, hey, now the term a 2-score game is entirely different in the USFL because you can have an 18-point lead and it'd be a 2-score game, which is wild to think about. So they're kind of making that go in there. It says here, onside kicks. Teams will have 2 options to retain possession after scoring. The first option will be a traditional onside kick attempt from the 25-yard line. The second will be running a 4th and 12 play from their own 33-yard line. Now, this was an initial rule proposal presented by the Denver Broncos and John Elway several years ago at the NFL Rules Committee, and they had thought about it, and then they had denied it. If the team makes a first down, fantastic. It retains possession from that spot. If the team attempting the onside kick fails, however, the defense gets the ball wherever the offense is down. So it is a risk-reward factor here, which I like it. It makes
Give me the
a lot
4th and 12
exciting.
Because the rules have killed the onside kick. Give me the 4th and 12 with
Unless
my skill players
Koo.
out there.
Younghoe Koo is the master of the onside kick, and the Atlanta Falcons seem to be the only team that can make it work these days. But for everybody else, it's like, hey, good luck with that.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, let's get to overtime. It says overtime will be a shootout in which each team's offense will alternate plays against the opposing defense from the 2-yard line. I'm not sure I like this one. I don't know if
it's basically the traditional 2-point conversion attempt.
Yeah. Each team
I'm thinking this way as like a shootout in the NFL. I mean, in the NHL or with soccer. Like you're going to alternate tries to try to score.
This makes sense now. It says here, each team will run a total of 3 plays, and each successful scoring attempt will receive 2 points. The team with the most points after each team has run its 3 plays wins. If the score is tied after each team runs 3 plays, the subsequent attempts become sudden death until a winner is declared. That's dope. And some new rules too. 2 forward passes. Offenses will be allowed to throw 2 forward passes behind the line of scrimmage, expanding teams' playbooks while adding even more excitement and trick play potential. Yes.
I had not seen that one yet.
So you can, so 2 forward passes from behind the line of scrimmage. Is that like per game? Like you're only allowed 2 forward passes?
No, I'm saying that's per play. Per play, you can have multiple forward passes.
I mean,
interesting.
From behind, but it says from behind the line of scrimmage.
So you can have 2 forward passes behind the line of scrimmage for running trick plays. You can do like literally double reverses using forward passes.
This is very interesting.
I mean, good luck having a receiver who can, with an arm that can still throw the ball that far by the time that route develops.
Yeah, that'll be the interesting one here. Instant replay. Okay, now we're starting to get to some other ones that hey, maybe the NFL should keep an eye on. Each coach will be allowed 1 replay challenge. Replay command at Fox Sports Control Center in LA will make all the replay decisions, meaning that 1 replay crew will make all the decisions. This will ensure accurate, consistent, and faster rulings. The USFL replay command will have the authority to overrule incorrect personal foul calls, including roughing the passer, hits on defenseless players, face mask penalties, horse collars, and more. USFL replay command will also be responsible for determining whether the act of pass interference is obviously intentional when it occurs 15 yards beyond the line of scrimmage. That now takes us to defensive pass interference. The penalty for defensive pass interference will mirror the NCAA rule with exceptions. Defensive pass interference will be a spot foul if it occurs less than 15 yards from the line of scrimmage, but it is a 15-yard penalty if the spot of the foul is beyond 15 yards.
Thank you. I like this.
This is beautiful.
I like this. Yes.
The goal is to decrease the punitive nature of defensive pass interference penalties. I'm already loving this.
Look at the USFL supporting DBs.
I'm a DB guy. This is great news. It says, however, a defender intentionally tackling a receiver beyond 15 yards past the line of scrimmage would be a spot foul.
So it's like, don't tackle him.
99. Let's say you're on the 1-yard line. You throw a 99-yard bomb. There's you get tackled at the opponent 45-yard line. And it's like, okay, that was an intentional. That's going to be obviously a big time, almost 55-yard.
I would rather give up a penalty than 6. That's all I always say the same.
I coach my guys that. That's what I coach my kids. I'd be like, hey, I would rather take a penalty than a touchdown because, hey, guess what? If we get a penalty, you know what? It's going to keep us on the field longer. But what if we stop them? What if we get a turnover on the next play? I'd rather take that chance than, giving up a touchdown on it. Offensive pass interference. If a pass does not cross the line of scrimmage, there can be no penalty for either offensive pass interference or ineligible player downfield.
Okay.
This rule change opens up the offense without undermining defense and forgoes punishment for infractions unrelated to the play.
It means offensive linemen don't stay behind on a screen pass. They can get downfield quick.
Yep. And it says kickoffs. All kickoffs will be from the 25-yard line. No kicking team member may line up any farther back than 1 yard, while the receiving team must have a minimum of 8 players in the setup zone between the 35 and 45-yard lines. After a kickoff travels 20 yards, the first touch must be by the receiving team. If an untouched kick becomes dead, the ball belongs to the receiving team at that spot.
Wait. Okay, that's interesting. That means on a traditional kickoff, the defense can't actually recover the ball. On a squib kick, the kicking team can't recover it then.
It becomes dead right there.
So it's a punt.
Pretty much.
It's got punt rules.
Yeah. I'm intrigued by this. I'm eager to see how this one goes. But, also it's like, I don't know if people went to the USFL Twitter page, they shared a video of like what to expect. Like when the kickoff happens, there will be drones flying. Right? You know that you have the cameras in NFL stadiums that are flying on the wire. You're going to have drones that are flying around that are close to the players, like not necessarily where they're going to touch them, but far enough and close enough to where you don't necessarily have to worry about there being contact by a drone and a player, which obviously I think is a liability issue.
I can't wait for the first time a drone gets hit by a ball. It's going to happen.
The angles are going to be beautiful, up close and personal. I'm excited. Like imagine you just see someone.
We're going to have mic'd up players, and we're also going to have helmet cams for the players this year. So we'll get to see both of those angles too.
Guess who wore a helmet camera back in 2015 here?
I know someone that rocked one, had a pretty good game that day.
Right in the face mask camera, you get a pick 6 on camera too. Outside of that, like you get to see the angle. I like that because I think that for football fans and consumers, being able to showcase, let's say like people who've never played the game, they're like, hey, what do they see? Like, what does it look like through the eyes of a football player? I think it's appealing. But for like the people that have played the game and have worn a helmet, it brings them back to like, hey, I remember this. Like I'm seeing what they're seeing. Like, okay, like for a DB, are my eyes looking at the wide receiver's helmet or are they staring at the guy's hips? Like if they're staring at the helmet, get him off the field. They're staring at the hips. Like you can go back to as a coach and say, hey, what the hell are you doing here? You're looking at his eyes. You're looking at his head. You're not even staring at his hips there.
Yeah,
I love it.
Hips don't lie, like Shakira would say.
Shakira said it. She said it best, my friend. But you know what, Tommy? This has been a fantastic episode of PFN Daily here today on youtube.com/Pro Football Network. We appreciate all the viewers that interacted with us here in chat today. Our good friend ABuff66, our good friend Outlaw2448. Outside of that, a lot of love for the consistency that we have here from these amazing 2 contributors. We appreciate it so much. But with that said, Tommy Garrett, myself, we'll be back tomorrow for a brand new episode, PFN Daily. You get it here, youtube.com/Pro Football Network.